Hello everyone, this is Brian Kelly from Association Mavens, where you get direct access to some of the foremost thinkers and teachers in the association industry. My guest today is Elizabeth Engel. Elizabeth is the CEO of Spark Consulting and has 15 years of wide-ranging experience working in association management. When she's not helping associations grow, Elizabeth loves to dance, listen to live music, cook, garden, and blog about the Philadelphia Eagles. Welcome to Association Mavens, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Brian.
So I wanted to have you on the show because I was very eager to talk to you about this white paper that you recently wrote a couple of months back, and you co-wrote it with Jeff DeCania, titled Attention Doesn't Scale, The Role of Content Curation in Membership Associations.
Yes.
So real quick, before we dive into the meat of what that white paper is about, can you tell us a little bit about how the white paper came to be, what the idea was for this, and really honing in on content curation for associations?
Sure. It's kind of an interesting story. I had gotten contacted by the Indiana Society of Association Executives asking me to do a presentation at their Cross Connect conference back in November. And I went to them with a bunch of different ideas about things I could talk about. So I gave them some of the stuff that I regularly present on, and then I thought, well, I could look at some of my recent blog posts and see, what were things that were really popular, got a lot of hits, got a lot of comments, whatever. And one of the things that came up in that was this concept of attention doesn't scale. Now, in the blog post, I had addressed it more from a personal perspective, so it was more the idea of our own attention doesn't scale, and how do we as individuals handle the problem of information overload. They were really interested in that concept, but they wanted me to do it less from like a personal development kind of standpoint and more from a what does this mean for membership associations standpoint. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be putting this new presentation together, what else might I want to do? I'm going to be doing a lot of research. How about doing a white paper? The reason that I got hooked up with Jeff, well, actually there were two reasons I got hooked up with Jeff. One is he's written a lot about a lot of the kinds of what does this mean for associations and what are we trying to help our members do kinds of stuff that came out in the white paper. And the other side of it was I was like, well, Jeff has put out a lot of white papers and ebooks and whatnot, and since this is my first go around with this, it'd be nice to work with somebody who knows what he's doing.
Right.
So he was my Jedi master, and I was the Padawan.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about this problem that you posit in the white paper, information overload.
Yes.
So maybe give us kind of a rundown of information overload, what that means, and also would love to have you talk a little bit about, is this a new problem? Is this a problem that has only recently surfaced because of certain issues? What do you think?
Yeah, you set that up really well. When I was doing the research for the white paper, I found all kinds of quotes about issues in there being too much information overload, all this kind of stuff. The earliest quote that I found was from Seneca the Elder in the 1st century of the Common Era. I'm not even going to attempt the Latin, but it translates to, "The abundance of books is a distraction." This was 1400 years before Gutenberg. So this is obviously not a new problem. And the phrase information overload was actually coined by Alvin Toffler, who is a pretty well-known futurist. He wrote a book in 1970 called Future Shock, and that was where the term information overload first appeared as a concept. And the thing that I think is interesting about what we're facing now is, this is something humans have dealt with for thousands of years, right? But what we've got today is something that is a degree in difference that is so large, it's actually a difference in, difference in degree. That's so large that it's actually a difference in kind at this point, where it's actually a new problem at this point because it's so much bigger. What do I mean by that? We've got a world now where it's very, very easy to publish. Whether you are an actual publisher, or someone who does this professionally, or a company that publishes, it doesn't even matter. Every single one of us publishes information of all types all the time. It's because of the proliferation of smartphones. I mean, you've got this wonderful little gadget with you all the time that allows you to basically stream your entire life live to the internet if you want to, as much as you want to. And, because of that, we have moved into a zettabyte world, okay? So in 2010, we actually passed the mark at which there was a zettabyte of information available on the world's electronic devices. And I was just checking before we started this interview today to see if there was any new, interesting, exciting information that had come out about this. Cisco Systems recently released, really recently released, their visual networking index. And not only is there a zettabyte of information available on the world's electronic devices at this point, they predict that by 2016, there will be 1.3 zettabytes of information traveling across the internet every year. So what's a zettabyte, right? I mean, this is this crazy term that nobody's ever heard of. We can kind of work up from things that we're familiar with, right? So we've got megabytes, and we know megabytes. Megabytes are file sizes. And then we've got gigabytes, and gigabytes are 1,000 megabytes. That we know too, because that's the size of computer hard drives. That's the size, you pick how many gigs you want for your smartphone, for your iPad. We know gigabytes, right? Each one of these jumps is 1,000 of the thing before it. So it's megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes, exabytes, and I see my hands are now going off the screen, and that's appropriate. Zettabytes. Another way of thinking about it is a zettabyte is the amount of information that's contained in 250 billion DVD movies. It's a lot of information.
It is a lot.
So yeah, and we've got all this stuff that we're trying to manage, right? The other piece of the problem is that, and that's the name of the paper, attention doesn't scale, right? Our human brains really haven't changed very much in millennia. And the 24-hour day hasn't changed in as long as time has existed. We're dealing with this massive flood of information, but we still have the same brains we've had since prehistoric times, pretty much, and we still have only 24 hours in a day to deal with it. And we can't scale that attention. Computers scale great. Add more memory, add more processors, add a bigger hard drive. All of a sudden the computer can do more. You can't add more memory to your brain. You have the brain that you have. And you can't add more processors to your day. You have 24 hours.
Okay, so let's shift the focus a bit to talk about the solution then. So we've got this mega problem with mega data and trying to process it all. It's just impossible for the human brain to do so. So you talk about a solution. What is that, and how is that important to addressing this issue?
So that is when we roll into this whole concept of content curation. And when you think about the term curation, the first thing that tends to pop to mind is museums, which is actually a pretty good place to start, because museum curation is very much like what we're looking at doing with data, with information, with content. It's you're collecting a lot of it, right? So if you're a museum curator, you're gonna put on an exhibit. So you collect way more stuff than you plan to use in the exhibit. Yep. And you sort through it all and you place it together so that it tells a story and it works together in context and it all plays nicely as a whole, and it puts together this comprehensible story, comprehensible picture of whatever it is that you're trying to show, whether it's paintings or you're trying to explain something that happened in history or you're trying to explain something that happens in science, whatever. And then you assemble this all in a way that both with words and with images and with items tells your story, and then you maintain it. Content curation is the same kind of thing, only again, it's with data or information rather than a bunch of Picassos.
Exactly. So in the white paper, you kind of outlined some of the types of curation that there are, as well as the kinds. Can you talk through, maybe not all of them, but at least highlight some of them that are important to understand?
Yeah, there are 5 basic ways that you can do curation. And so I'm actually going to pull up the white paper so I make sure I don't miss any of them. But there's aggregation, which is list making, basically. I mean, anytime you see a top 10 list,
Yeah.
that person has aggregated content for you and created a top 10 list. Those are the most common, although they're probably the least useful, because a true I mean, it's just a list of stuff that I thought was good. Now I didn't give you anything else around it. The kind of the next level is distillation. Distillation that's more like what the museum curator is doing. So that's when you've got the stuff and you say, okay, here's all the stuff that I'm dealing with. Here's the stuff that's really important. Now let me package it so it tells a story. Okay. Then there's curation as elevation, which is like trend spotting. So really common thing that people would be familiar with where they do this really well is Mashable. Mashable is all about technology trends. They're doing elevation curation. Then there's mashups, which most people are familiar with from the music side at this point. Everything from the Gray album to, whatever the newest thing that you yourself might have put together, mashing up interesting lyrics and interesting music and all that sort of thing. And of course, mashups don't have to just be done with music. We're seeing now movie mashups. We're seeing mashups in actual visual art. There's a whole world out there of this. And then the final version is chronology, and that's basically when you're just putting things in time order. That's the job of a historian. So there's sort of what you're doing, right? Yep. But then there's also the issue of who's doing it. And there's basically 3 ways that you can do curation as far as the how. And the first one is you have a machine do your curation for you. We all know how this goes. That's Google. I mean, that's what Google is doing, is you type your search term in, they've got an algorithm, it's picking up everything that's related to the search term and saying, here it is. Yeah. Unfortunately, the information might not always really be what you were looking for. I'm trying to put it in a nice way. Basically, with a machine, you can usually figure out a way to fool the algorithm, right? And Google's always trying to stay one step ahead of, the people who are trying to send you to phishing websites and whatnot, whenever it is that you're looking for whatever it is that you're looking for. But it's an arms race there. And you can fool machines. Yep. Another way of doing it is to totally crowdsource it. And that's like Reddit and Dig and anything where, the content that is that shows up when you search for something is whatever a bunch of people have voted for. At least there's a human element there, but it is still also possible to game that kind of a system. And once again, you're in a place where it might just be the most popular content. It might not actually be the thing that answers your question. Yeah. The third version of it is expert curation. And that's when you have a true human element in it that's not just voting, but where you have somebody who has some knowledge of whatever the topic is that you're particularly interested in, who has actually combed through these resources and even in some cases provided some editorial context to whatever it is. Now, I personally tend to think that you probably get the most bang for your buck when you use all 3, right? So have the machine start, have it generate your list for you, throw the list to a crowdsourced group, have them vote up the top stuff, and then have your experts look at the stuff that gets voted up and say, okay, of the top 10, these 5 are actually the ones that are good, and let me tell you why. Great.
So it's incredibly fascinating. I think these are some really important things for those of us that work in and around associations. Can you talk a little bit about why this is such a thing that associations in the 21st century can leverage to stay relevant, to stay current, and really kind of ward off the competition, so to speak, by being a relevant, helpful resource to their members?
Well, and that's exactly the point. We're in a zettabyte world. Our members are in the same zettabyte world with us. I mean, they're dealing with the exact same problems with information overload and all the stuff that we're dealing with as individuals. The extra twist, I guess, with associations is that in a lot of cases, we're actually making that problem worse for them rather than helping them with it. You know, it's hard to admit this, and there are certainly associations that have peer-reviewed journals and do individual or original research and all that sort of thing. Most of us are not really doing that, you know, and if we're honest with ourselves, the content that we're providing to our members in a lot of cases is not particularly original, innovative, unique, etc. You know, one of the other things that's interesting in our modern world is that we're existing in a world where the passionate amateur can really have a large impact. I mean, that's what Wikipedia is all about. Nobody's getting paid over there. You know, it's been proved to be as accurate, if not more so, than Encyclopedia Britannica, even to the point that Encyclopedia Britannica stopped publishing this year because there wasn't any point to it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, now we've got this kind of this passionate amateur community out there, or communities that are addressing all sorts of issues and topics and professions and industries and everything that you can possibly think of. You know, we're kind of plodding along as associations, putting out our newsletters and putting out our magazines and all that kind of thing. And that was fine when we were in a world where information was scarce, but that ended a long time ago. I mean, it is no longer the case that associations are, in most cases, the authoritative source of information and data about their professions or industries for their professions or industries. What our members need from us today is not to be the authoritative source. They need help processing this flood of information that's coming towards them, because what they really need is to be able to make decisions and prioritize tasks and turn all this data into information that can eventually get them to wisdom.
Yep.
And that provides an opening for us to change the way we relate to our members and to change what we provide for them in a really fundamental way.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody earlier this week that's an expert in content marketing, and was talking about how, you know, associations have been originating content since their inception, really, but that, you know, the mode of operation has become kind of just, you know, we're going to create content, we're going to, you know, push this stuff out to our members, versus now we find ourselves in a world where people are delivering content in a strategic way, appealing to different profiles of members within their organization, and then, you know, this is something that really needs to be thought through. And it sounds like the notion of content curation combined with a very strategic view on content development and content creation, those two things coinciding could be incredibly powerful for associations to stay at the forefront of being, you know, an incredibly valuable resource to those, you know, that are either members or outside of the membership wall, but are looking for things to address solutions or address problems that they have, or deliver solutions to those problems.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about, okay, let's say as an association we're going to try to address the topic of leadership. The traditional way of dealing with it is, okay, well, either we've got somebody on staff or we hire a freelancer to write us a 2,000-word article about leadership that we'll stick in our magazine when we have our leadership issue. And maybe that article's great and maybe it's okay, and probably it's not really all that cutting edge. So that's the old way. What I'm advocating for here is to change our way of looking at that. Okay, so we've got a leadership issue coming out. We want to say something great and innovative about leadership. So what we do is we've got machine curation to pop us all the great resources that are out there on leadership, which we then take to some sort of group that can do some voting to say, you know, these are the articles and the resources and whatnot that we think are pretty good. We then grab those top 5, 10 vote getters and we turn them over to a group of experts that maybe our staff hopefully include some of our members who are skilled and experienced in leadership and leadership development. And we say, okay, take a look at these. This is what we think is probably pretty good. Can you select for us the 3 best resources that the rest of our membership community and our other audiences need to pay attention to with regards to leadership and leadership development? And can you then tell them why this is particularly relevant and important to our particular profession or industry? How does this actually tie to what we do? How does this fit into our world? And that's the value that you can add as the association. So there's, Sloan Management Review and Harvard Business Review and Fast Company and every other great publication out there that you can think of, and nobody's got time to read it all, right? So instead of saying, okay, well, here's your stack of business reading and we're going to throw our association magazine on top of it, right, say, forget it. We're going to go and look at all that stuff and find the top 3 resources and tell you why it matters to you in your profession or your industry right now, right here, today, and how it's going to make a difference for you.
Excellent. So one last question while we wrap up the discussion that I wanted to ask you was, you've had the white paper out for a couple of months now. What's the traction been? How association professionals been responding to this? It seems like it's probably still early for these concepts to be taking root, but I know Jeff's been talking about this for a while now. Do you have any insight into that you can share?
It's just anecdotal stuff. I mean, it's been downloaded now 350, 400 times, something like that. I launched it right after Thanksgiving. So it's been out, I guess, like a month and a half at this point, the holiday month and a half. Yeah. And I've gotten, good comments on it. The presentation that I put together for the Indiana Society of Association Executives, I'm actually going to be giving again at some other events, including, so I'll put in a plug for this now, Digital Now in April. So the annual event that Fusion Productions puts on. So I hope it gets traction. I mean, one of the issues with this, and one of the questions that you had asked me, kind of thinking in advance about what we were going to talk about today, was who's doing a good job of this? And the answer is, for the most part, not a whole lot of people. This is more, the point of the white paper is to be more proscriptive, like encouraging people that this is a direction that we need to look at changing to go as associations, rather than like a descriptive thing of, hey, everybody's already doing this and doing a great job of it. And actually, if that were the case, I wouldn't have needed to write the white paper. It's more a look at where we can and should think about going than this is where we already are. Excellent.
Well, we'll be sure to put up on the screen for everybody the short link to download the white paper. So you should be seeing that now. And Elizabeth, thank you so much for doing the interview. Thanks to everybody for watching. Be sure to sign up today in the upper right-hand corner of this website to be updated via email when new interviews are posted. Also, follow @BrianKellyNow on Twitter to stay on top of all things Association Mavens related. And lastly, please submit your recommendation for which Association Maven you'd like to see interviewed next. Thanks again for watching, and I'll look forward to bringing you more great interviews soon. Until next time, bye-bye.